Joining me now from Memphis, Tennessee is Errol Lewis of the New York Daily News. In Washington, Diana West of the Washington Times. Here in New York, syndicated columnist Miguel Perez and Democratic strategist Hank Scheinkopf, all CNN contributors. You know, I really should ask you, Errol, as you're standing in Memphis, it's the 40th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And what do you think, in terms of where you're standing and what you're hearing, what do you think is the status of race and politics in this country today?
Well, it's very interesting. I'm standing here in front of the Lorraine Motel where Dr. King was assassinated. This has been kind of like a civil rights convention. There have been any number of lectures and marches and conferences and religious services, all dedicated to trying to understand his life and project forward what the next 40 years will look like. There's really no consensus other than, I think, that issues of poverty, which was the last campaign of Dr. King's life, is an unfinished mission that a lot of people and organizations are talking about continuing now. And poverty and the economy very much on the minds of voters. Let me just bring up a CNN Essence Magazine opinion research poll. And the question was, is the country ready for a black president? And they asked all Americans, and you got 76% said yes. Now, what's interesting here is they asked blacks and whites separately, and that's where you get some interesting results. The same poll showed 78% of whites believe the country's ready for a black president, just 69% of blacks. Errol, let's ask you first. What do you make of these results? Well, I mean, I guess I'd call that gap the pessimism gap. There was a belief early on, before the Iowa caucuses, that Barack Obama would go nowhere. In fact, that led a lot of people, a lot of leaders, to stick with Hillary Clinton. And it was only when he made that sort of surprise move in Iowa that people began to think, oh, gee, maybe the nation has changed. I think the difference in the polls really just suggests that if you're a black American, you have a lot more to lose if you're wrong on that question. So I think you see a certain amount of caution when it comes to this question of whether or not the country is ready for a black president.
Miguel, thoughts on this?
I'm ready to vote for a black president. The question is whether I agree with him on the issues. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of Americans who don't feel as I do. There's a lot of Americans who will not vote for him simply because of race. Now, that's just a group of Americans, not all Americans, and not all Americans who are going to switch to McCain, because last week I made this comment here, and some people think that it applies. I'm talking about them. A lady wrote me last week saying, you know, how dare you say this about me? Lady, I don't know you. It's just a few people that feel that they will not vote for a black man.
Yeah, well, race and gender, very much hot topics. And, of course, gender's also in this, too, Diana.
Yes, well, I think those are very healthy numbers. I'd be interested in when that poll was actually taken. I think that the candidacy of Barack Obama has just been an astonishing validation of America, excuse me, contemplating being ready to have a black president. And again, we're coming down to what are the policies. And on the Democratic side, we have the gender issues you mentioned, and two candidates who are almost indistinguishable policy-wise. And I don't know how it'd be interesting to see if that poll had also taken into consideration.
Yeah, just for the viewer information, March 26th to April 2nd was the duration of time for that poll. Hank, thoughts on this?
A nation that is not ready to confront its future in this way would not have those kinds of numbers. It shows how far we've come, and the legacy of Dr. King on this day is that we're still having this discussion and still trying to make it work.
But is that the legacy of Dr. King in terms of wanting to judge people by the content of their character? I mean, I think that the legacy has shifted all over these 40 years to be one that is less close to his words and more close to sticking with skin color, which I wish we could work on in the next 40 years getting away from.
Nevertheless, this campaign seems to be encompassing all of these issues at once. And as Miguel points out, policy is important, but so are other considerations. We'll be right back with more of our political panel in just a moment. Stay with us.
But then Bobby said, like, why don't you take Samantha? But then Susie was all like, no, you can't do that because, Dad, this is really Old Mutual.
Bridge or tunnel?
Bridge, please. It's much more Old Mutual this time of day.
I want you to focus on one thing and one thing only. Protect the Old Mutual. You got that?
May sound strange now, but with our new thinking about your financial future, it won't for long.
It's completely Old Mutual.
If you say so.
I'm a sinner. I have a competition in me.
I've abandoned my boy!
Rated on DVD Tuesday.
Who's that? Oh yeah, that's me before I lost 41 pounds on Nutrisystem. See ya.
With the all-new Nutrisystem Advanced program, you can eat great and lose weight on our best weight loss program ever.
I know I'm not your average gal. I love sports. Football. How many girls could do that?
The all-new program that lets you eat carbs, is heart healthy, and even helps fight hunger.
I got this body eating pizza, burgers, even chocolate.
Through this special offer, you can get an extra 3 weeks of meals free. For about $10 a day, you'll enjoy 4 weeks of perfectly portioned meals delivered right to your door. And your shipping is free.
But I love Nutrisystem because it's easy and it works. It's as simple as that.
See how Nutrisystem can change your body. And you can get a full 3 weeks of food absolutely free.
Get Nutrisystem and score.
Call now, 877-532-SIZE, and find out how you can get 3 weeks absolutely free.
CNN, most watched in cable news in 2008. The Situation Room, #1. Dobbs Tonight, #1. AC 360, #1. The #1 network for news in primetime.
This is CNN.
Closed captioning hours provided by Aspercream. Maximum strength medicine knocks out pain.
In the grip of aches and arthritis pain? Break it with new Aspercream Heat Gel. Powerful medicine delivers fast relief without odor. Aspercream, break the grip of pain.
I'm back with Errol, Diana, Miguel, and Hank. Let's go straight to the controversy over Obama's church this week. Let's listen to a comment about race by Reverend John Thomas, who's president of the United Church of Christ. He, in essence, defended Reverend Wright's controversial comments. Let's listen.
It's a requirement of a sacred conversation, first, that we acknowledge sacredness in one another. But that does not mean that our language is always going to be gentle and quiet and graceful, because racism is not gentle and quiet and graceful.
Your reaction, Miguel, to this? And can Obama put this behind him, or do you think this will continue to be a discussion?
Look, you can be gentle, but you don't have to be offensive. This language is obviously too strong. It's not the kind of language we hear in churches, and Obama will not put this behind him. This will come out again in the general election.
Errol, your thoughts?
Oh, I tend to disagree with that, to tell you the truth. I mean, you know, what we're talking about is a political question of why this candidate did not reject his own pastor. I think 6 months from now, in light of the economic news we just got today, 80,000 lost jobs in the last month alone. We're clearly in a recession. I would hope that American voters will have more on their minds than why this candidate didn't have a different relationship with his pastor and I guess with God.
Yeah. Let's look at some Quinnipiac University poll for Pennsylvania, likely Democratic primary voters. And so let's take a look at how Clinton and Obama are doing. And you see right there that from March to April, there's been a little bit of a slip for Hillary Clinton. Your thoughts, Hank?
Bosnia, Trump's minister. That's what's going on here. People are paying attention more closely.
You think so? Diana, go ahead.
I think that this is going to come down to such an emotional temperature, this whole decision. And I do think that that Reverend Wright's comments are going to continue to be part of Senator Obama's discussion of character and personality and vision. So I think that we have not seen the end of any of this, despite the United Church of Christ spokesman's comments, which really could be used to excuse almost any hate speech or invective. So I'm surprised to hear that kind of thing.
Yes. Let's listen to what Howard Dean is very intent on getting Florida delegates seated in Denver. And I want to read to you what he said. We're all committed to doing everything we can to ensure that Florida delegation is seated in Denver. We can all agree to whatever the solution is. It must have the support of both campaigns. Now, we see these numbers very, very tight. Do you think that both campaigns would support this, Miguel?
It just depends on, you know, if it's a figuratively speaking, we're going to sit them there and they're not going to have any power. They're just going to sit there. What good is that? It's phony. I don't get it.
Absolutely ridiculous. Hillary Clinton has a right beef here. They should have been allowed to rerun those races. The delegations she would have won. However, if that were to occur, and it's not going to occur, the DNC would have to say, wait a second, we're not trying to rob Barack Obama here. That's what they're fooling with, and it's not going to work out, and Democrats are going to be angry. And in those states, those are places where Democratic votes are really needed, and they may drift come the fall.
The potential to be very contentious. Go ahead, Diana.
I was just going to say, think about how tidy this would be if the state parties actually were held to the original rules. They were told if they did a certain thing by the national party, they would not be seated. If the National Party and sort of grown-ups on voters actually acknowledge the fact that they broke rules, we wouldn't be having this discussion of how to smudge things and fudge the rules. It's kind of an interesting morality play, I think, if you could step away from it.
I'm afraid we won't be able to step away from it. Errol, go ahead.
Well, I mean, let's keep in mind that this is a practical business, and Governor Dean is a very practical man. What I hear him saying is that once the Florida delegation won't make any difference in the outcome of the election, of the nominating contest, then fine, seat them. Count them all for Hillary if you want. But I suspect that it'll be a different kind of a question if the Florida delegates are, in fact, the margin of victory for either candidate. I just don't anticipate that happening, and I don't think Governor Dean does either.
All right. That's an interesting point. Diana West, Errol Lewis, Miguel Perez, Hank Scheinkopf, thank you all for being here.